and welcome back to the financial plan. We have completed the discussions on the protection of wealth, and today we will be addressing the layer that really forms also part of the protection of wealth but falls on top of the four pillars, namely medical aid or medical insurance. So to that end, we have invited Johanna Lombard from Hampshire Independent Advisors to answer some questions for us. Welcome, Johanna. And we will be focusing on the South African landscape in terms of medical aid and medical insurance, where there is no national health scheme, and we have private healthcare. And whilst there are state facilities that one can utilize, it's important to understand that those are only free cost-wise if you're unemployed, as a heads up there. So I'm going to step out, and Dol, over to you. And
thanks very much, Joe.
Okay, sure.
Cool. Well, Johanna, thank you very much for joining us. We're very excited here to have you on the financial plan with us, and we're excited to digest into the medical aid. So, traditional medical aids, also known as old generation medical aids, they cover your day-to-day expenses as well as hospitalizations and procedures and the like. How exactly do the new generation medical aids differ in structure?
Okay, so traditional medical aids actually give you a set amount of benefits for certain benefit categories. So for example, on the day-to-day side, you will have your 10 GP visits, your 2 dentist visits, and then let's say for example 5,000 rand for any medication that you require. So once these benefits are depleted, you will actually have to cover these benefits out of your own, or these expenses rather, out of your own pockets. New generation medical aids, or savings type options as I like to call them, they actually work according to an amount that is debited into your medical savings account at the beginning of each year. So the biggest difference between these two is that you have freedom of choice when it comes to your medical savings account on what medical expenses you want to spend the money on. What is the same about them is that when the benefits are depleted, so for example when your 10,000 rand that you were allocated at the beginning of the year is depleted, you will have to fund the day-to-day expenses out of your own pocket.
Okay, brilliant.
Yeah.
So we've talked about how medical aid is limiting. How exactly does gap cover fall into the equation then?
So gap cover is a short-term insurance policy that basically, it's actually in the name. So it basically covers you for the shortfall that can arise when doctors, specialists, and anaesthetists ask more than what the medical schemes are willing to pay. So these policies, it's important to note that these policies actually work in conjunction with your medical aid. So you need a medical aid in order to have gap cover, otherwise there's no benefit in having this product. And yeah, it generally provides cover for shortfalls that arise for in-hospital expenses.
Okay. And then we talk about, the big question, how exactly does the costing for medical aid work, especially in relation to your income?
So generally, your income really doesn't have an effect on the premium of the medical aid because the premium is set. In recent years, however, Discovery, Bonitas, Momentum are some of the schemes that introduced these options to us, and it's referred to as the income-based options. So what happens is that when you apply for an option like this, the medical scheme will take a look at your income that you receive monthly. They will then have a look at the income structure that they have on their side that is obviously set by the specific medical scheme, and then they will calculate your premium accordingly. These options are really actually focused more on the lower income earners because it gives them an opportunity to actually enter the healthcare market at a more affordable rate.
Going on to medical aid applications, how exactly does that application process work when you're applying for medical aid for the first time?
So once you apply to a medical scheme, you will actually have to go through a process that we refer to as underwriting. So during this process, the medical scheme that you're applying to, they will have a look at your medical aid history as well as your medical history, and they will then apply waiting periods and penalties as they see fit. So it's important to note that these waiting periods and penalties are actually done in accordance with the Medical Schemes Act. It's not something that is regulated by the medical schemes.
Okay.
So it's done across the board with all the medical schemes.
And based on your general health?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. And can you change your existing medical aid within the same service provider?
So you can. Plan movements are however sometimes restricted, and the reason why I say that is at the end of each year, medical schemes release their updates or their updated benefits rather for the coming year. So when that happens, they allow the members to obviously take into account the new benefits and then choose any option that they would like to be on for the year that follows. Once this period ends, which is normally at the start of the new year, then they restrict the plan movements that members can do during the course of the year. and this is normally restricted by members only being allowed to downgrade their options, so they won't be able to allow, or they won't be allowed to upgrade their option if, for example, they get diagnosed with cancer or anything
Sure.
like that. Yeah.
Sure. Any deterioration of
Yes.
that. Okay, great. And we spoke about what happens when you apply for medical aid for the first time, and we spoke about the underwriting procedures within that. What exactly happens when you change from one medical aid scheme to another? Does that still apply?
So underwriting will still apply no matter what, no matter how long you've been on a medical aid. If you move from one provider to another, you'll have to go through the underwriting process. Once again, they'll take into account your medical aid history and then your medical history, and they will then apply waiting periods and penalties if necessary.
Okay. So we obviously don't have a national health benefit here in South Africa. We have to take out medical aid in our personal capacity. Are there any tax benefits to having a medical aid?
So you do have tax benefits. The monthly deductible amounts will differ from the amount of dependents that you have registered on your medical aid. For example, if it's a main member only, the monthly deductible amount will be just over 300 Rand. If it's a main member and one dependent, it'll be just over 600 Rand, and then if it's a main member and two dependents, it'll be over 800 Rand. There is an additional amount or additional tax credit rather that you will get for any additional dependents, and that is just over 200 Rand per month.
Okay, brilliant. And we talked about medical aid and we've dissected that. What exactly is medical insurance and how does it differ?
So medical insurance is also a short-term insurance policy, and it's a more affordable option of healthcare. So on these options, you only have access to cover for emergency and accidental events, and then also some day-to-day benefits like your general GP visits, dentist visits, optometry, and in some cases actually medication as well. So the type of cover or the level of cover that you receive from these options will depend on the type of option that you choose, because it obviously ranges from the basic cover to a bit more comprehensive.
Sure.
The biggest difference between these options and medical aids are that these options are a bit more restrictive, as they don't cover any elective or planned procedures in a hospital. That's something that's actually only covered by the medical aid, and also these options, it's actually important to note that these options have an overall policy limit. So there's an overall amount that they will cover you for, and if it rises above that amount, then you are on your own.
You.
Yes. So the nice thing about this is actually that because it's regulated by two different laws, it can actually be added onto your medical aid to provide you with additional benefits. As I mentioned previously, it's a more affordable option for health cover, so you can actually take it on its own as well.
Okay,
Yeah.
specifically for the lower income
Yes.
earners.
Yes, if
Okay.
you can't afford medical aid.
Thank you. So we talk about affordability, and we can refer back to our third pillar of our wealth protection being your lifestyle protection pillar. Another great option as an alternative is just to take out a couple $100,000 worth of cover there, covering any major negative health events that may occur. Well, that concludes our chat with Jana. Thank you very much for coming through again. And if there are any further questions that you may have that you'd like to direct through Jana, please click the link below. Thanks very much, guys, again for joining us here at the Financial Plan. And we've concluded now our wealth protection and the medical aid cover on top of that. Please join us next week for the start of our second chapter of financial planning, being the wealth creation. Please don't forget to subscribe and like.